thought that we were in a college football playoff elimination game heading into the month of November, but that's what's on display this weekend at Bryant-Denny Stadium as the Alabama Crimson Tide, with their back against the wall, play host to the Missouri Tigers. And we're breaking down everything. Welcome on into the SEC Unfiltered pregame show. He's Dave Shumate. I'm Cole Thompson, talking Tigers and Tide down in Tuscaloosa. Real quickly, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and that ring notification down below. That way you don't miss a single episode of SEC Unfiltered, live reaction shows, post-game, Sunday Fun Day, Dave Talk Ball, Monday Morning Power Hour. Regardless of the content you enjoy, make sure that you smash the subscribe button and that ring notification. Download the podcast version of the show, really wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Follow us on the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Follow Dave at Mock 10 Sports, me at Mr. Cole Thompson, and check out all of our great work found at SECUnfiltered.com. This preview is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. Go to PrizePicks.com and use that promo code SECU at sign up to get a $50 instant play whenever you set your first $5 lineup. And guys, this is the gambling of college football in a fun way for you to stay involved with your favorite team. Do you think Brady Cook hits the over in passing? Do you think that Jalen Milroe hits the over in rushing? Do you think that these defenses can keep this one a close call? How about you put your money where your mouth is? Go to prizepicks.com, use that promo code SECU, $50 instant play with your first $5 lineup. The Tide plays host in what feels like back against the wall, no more ifs, ands, or buts. Have to kind of have this type of game. Dave, I have no idea what to make of this. If you would have told me in the offseason, Alabama coming off of the third Saturday in October, maybe it would look a little sluggish because it was Tennessee, it was at Rocky Top, that would be one thing. Now you're telling me Alabama cannot afford to look anywhere near as pedestrian as they have against South Carolina, against Vanderbilt, and even at times against Tennessee, because I'll tell you what, one of the best receivers that resides in the country is heading on down to Nick Saban Field.
Yeah, I mean, you're at a jail-free cards now. Alabama's got to win out. I mean, I had them with 2 losses at this point. It wasn't to Vanderbilt. I had them to Georgia and Tennessee at this point. So, I mean, it's not that wild to really think that if you just change the Georgia game to the Vanderbilt, switch Georgia and Vandy, you're probably not sitting there all panicked. I think it's just when you watch the game, though, It just feels so much lack of complementary football between these between Alabama's offense and defense right now. I think if anyone in the country, person, team, whatever you want to call it, that needs a bye week, it is Alabama right now. But before they get to that bye week, they have a Missouri team that does Brady Cook, is that coming back from the hospital, comeback double-digit comeback win in the fourth quarter against Auburn? Does that kind of like ignite them? Somehow Alabama's favored by 13.5. Vegas keeps loading up Alabama's a favorite. I don't understand it. I'm sure they have their reasons. But if you're watching the games, it's just like, how are they favored in some of these games? 22 against South Carolina, 3 against Tennessee last week, 13.5 this week against the number 9, a top 20 team in Missouri. Granted, Missouri has had their struggles this year, but still, Alabama's banged up on the back end. I don't know, Devontae Smith's questionable. Keon Sabb's going to be out for multiple weeks. Bray Hubbard, who you saw played some, number 18 last week, he's going to be starting this week. And you mentioned it, Cole. Missouri has a ton of weapons on the outside, man.
They have a ton of weapons.
Kirby Moore can scheme up some things against an already thin Alabama secondary that is banged up and missing some key guys at that Husky position that run the Kane Womack offense. I think this game, again, Alabama has to get to this bye week and have a chance to just go lay the whole season out at the LSU game. If you don't win this week, though, it doesn't matter. And I think this week's going to be, it reminds me a little bit more of the South Carolina game as it gets closer.
What's really interesting is that Alabama could be on a 4-game losing streak as much as they have back-to-back. I mean, as much as they have a key critical win against South Carolina, because all you needed was one stop at the back of the end zone. Ryan Williams not getting in against Georgia to lose that game. All you needed was 1 2-point conversion and potentially a game-winning field goal for South Carolina to win that game. So you're basically treading on thin ice that is getting thinner and thinner as the sun rises. Let's talk about Brady Cook, though. And I will agree that 13.5-point line is ridiculous. And this is a game that's really kind of important to me because of everyone knows we Alabama people, also bandwagon Mizzou fan. This one's pulling at my heartstrings a little bit, but Brady Cook, I made a joke last week. It's like they took the $6 million man premise and did that with Brady Cook's body, because if he was bionic in that third quarter, that pass to Mookie Cooper to set up the run for Marcus Carroll, that fourth down connection with Luther Burden, that is a night and day difference version of Brady Cook. And it's something about playing in the homecoming game, a game that you have been watching since you were a little kid growing up in St. Louis, playing for a team that you've always wanted to represent, you getting that massive victory, and one that really was also a season saver in a sense. It's one thing to do it at home at Faroe. It's another thing to do it on the road in Bryant-Denny Stadium. It's another thing to do it against a Kane Womack defense that kind of at this point has to ball out. But I will say, the throws that we saw from Brady Cook when he came back after Drew Pine was in for basically 2 hours, that to me shows the growth and maturity that you want in a passer, and kind of brought back the vision of, okay, well, you know what? When we were talking about where Brady Cook resided in tier quarterbacks, this is what we kind of expected. Clean, direct, decisive passes that were leading receivers, that were just right in the breadbasket. If that's the version that you're going to get on Saturday with Luther Burden, with Marquise Johnson, with Theo Weiss, with Mookie Cooper, if you're lucky and you have Brett Norfleet, we'll know more about his stats throughout the week. To me, that creates mismatch nightmares, especially for an Alabama secondary that you brought up. Devonta Smith right now at the Husky role, he could be out. Keon Sabb, who, by the way, can we just give a ton of credit to and a little bit of a round of applause for him playing with a broken foot against Tennessee? Like, that is the epitome of a dude that wants to be out there and make a statement for his program. But now that statement is somebody else has to step on up, because if you watched him leave in that matchup. So this could be a really long day for Alabama secondary at the version of Brady Cook that we saw on Saturday take the field this Saturday.
No, you're right. Yeah, Keon Sabb playing with a broken foot in the second half. You're right. He'll be out at least a couple of weeks, depending on how long Alabama's season continues. But no, you're right. If you're Missouri, could that win against Auburn, while it didn't look pretty, but to be fair, 85, 90% of it, 95% of it was that without your signal caller. So to be fair, you'll take that win any way you get it. If I'm Missouri, if I'm Brady Cook, Kirby Moore, Eli Drinkwitz, I'm kind of salivating at the potential shots we could have downfield against Alabama. Even in the first half, Alabama gave up 0 points. But as we saw numerous times, Dante Thornton, Chris Brazzell open down the field. Damani Jackson even looks like he's still lingering a little bit from that hit pointer he sustained against South Carolina 2 weeks ago. You tell he was laboring a little bit in a run. Just Nico Iamaleava couldn't put it on him. So shots are going to be there. They've been there all year, even going back to the first game of the year against Western Kentucky, even against South Florida. They just didn't have guys who could go distribute their football to the weapons. Brady Cook, while he's missed his shots too, you feel a little bit more confident in him hitting them at some point, just like Nico. It was like when Alabama was down 7-0 or up 7-0 against Tennessee, after 3 turnovers and Tennessee missed 2 kicks, you were almost betting, hey, what's more likely to happen here? Nico and the Tennessee receivers start connecting on some of these, or does Alabama's DBs who are banged up, injured, do they magically start covering 2 to 3 more yards better, not giving that much separation? I'm going to take Nico and the receivers starting to hit some of these at some point. Maybe that's what happens a little bit Saturday. I'll be interested to see what Kane Womack's situation is, how he schemes up Missouri on Saturday. I mean, Bray Hubbard getting the start. He fits that Husky role better. They're going to be, Eli Drinkwitz, Kirby Moore, going to be trying to somehow get him matched up with Luther Burden, who's projected right now the number 3 wide receiver in the draft class. That's a tough ask for a young guy like Bray Hubbard to go do that in his first start. So if you're Alabama defensively, you feel like you may be a little bit on your heels. And you talked about it, Cole. For whatever reason, Missouri's gone away from the outside zone running scheme. And I like Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll. We talked about it. We previewed A&M not too long ago. For whatever reason, they got down to that game and abandoned that. You felt like they did it a little bit against Auburn. Can they establish that run? Because I think Alabama's lacking some athletes on the outside too. It can't keep up. If I'm Missouri offensively, I like my matchup going into this one.
What I will say is that they rushed it 31 times against Auburn. Nobody had more than 8 carries, and that was Brady Cook for -7 yards. Marcus Carroll had 8 for 40, but still, they were able to run the football. I don't know if they trusted their zone blocking to where they kind of went away from it. Maybe the being down by 14 also doesn't help you. What's going to be, I think, for me, one of the big-time matchups for Alabama's sake is how are you going to rotate in your defense backs? Because Alabama this year has been very poignant about getting in Jalen Mbakwe. They've been very poignant about getting in guys like Bray Hubbard, getting in guys like Cameron Howard. Like they've done their job to allow players to kind of mix in the back end of the secondary. But This is one of those games where you can't mix in. What you have to decide is how many reps do we want Jalen Milroe to have to play maybe on the outside? Do we move Jamani Jackson into the Husky role? It probably wouldn't work, but do we figure that one out? What do we do opposite of Keon Sapp? Do we trust that we're going to throw in a Jalen Milroe, or do we instead think that Xavier Brown is going to be able to play only at safety? Like how do we make up for those mistakes at defensive back, at safety? And again, this is a team with weapons. And the crazy part about this team is Mizzou is not getting the respect that it has probably deserved because of how many errant passes have come, even in matchups against Vanderbilt and matchups against Buffalo, and certainly the matchup at the beginning of the year against Murray State. They were not connecting. And you could see that there was a complete and total transparent misdirection between Brady Cook and his targets. But that does not mean that the targets are bad. Luther Burden, for your money and for mine, is the best receiver still in the SEC. From a seasoned experience, from a route running percentage, from a catch radius, Theo Weiss is a perfect complement to what this offense wants to run. Joshua Manning, Mookie Cooper, Brett Norfleet, if he's healthy, gets to get involved. Marquise Johnson, if he's healthy. Again, that's a guy that can fly on the football field, that is track speed winning on fly patterns, vertical threats. So Alabama is going to have to win its one-on-one matchups. It's also going to have to hope that they can get a little physical at times with the receivers to break up passes, because if the ball is in the right placement, they have the dudes that can make this a very, very, very long track race out in Bryant-Denny Stadium, and not in favor of Alabama, who has its own weapons that can do the exact same thing.
Yeah, and I don't anticipate Luther Burden having a second bad game in a row. I mean, he had a key fumble on the punt return, had a drop ball. But, and to be fair, I mean, it wasn't his starting quarterback, Drew Palm, but still, if you're an Alabama fan, if you're Kane Womack, you got to be a little scared, especially in the back end with how many injuries and the weapons Missouri has. On the other side, though, I mean, I think this game's a little opposite to me, the South Carolina game, from a perspective, Cole, where South Carolina's defense is better than Missouri's for sure.
Yeah.
But I would say Missouri's offense is probably a worse matchup for Alabama right now than South Carolina's offense is. So something's going to have to give. There's no excuses for Alabama's offense this year or this week. Again, I don't think you go put – Missouri's not bad enough for you. I mean, maybe you do have a great game. You go put up 40 on them one game like A&M did with Connor Wigman. But, again, how does this Missouri defense – again, I mean, they kind of held their own a little bit against Auburn. I feel like Auburn continues to find ways to lose games. Conversation for another day. But I think specifically in this matchup, how healthy is Jalen Milroe? You go back and watch that game. That was one of the worst quarterback performances in an Alabama football game I can remember in the last 10 years. I mean, it's probably up there with his fourth quarter performance against Texas and maybe the Buckner start against South Florida last year. Outside of that, can't remember a worse start. Looks like maybe something's wrong with his left leg, his plant leg. Like, everything's sailing on him. Again, like I mentioned, no one needs a bye week more than that kid. I mean, he came off last year off a bye week looking like a totally different athlete after taking some rehab and stuff like that. But you have to get through this week. I think Nick Sheridan and the boys, Kalen DeBoer and them, they have to put together a good game plan, whatever that may be for Jalen Milroe in this game to fit into. Again, yesterday, Kalen DeBoer, they asked him if he was hurt. He didn't say he wasn't hurt. He just essentially said he wasn't hurt enough to not play. So we'll see from that perspective. I don't think you can just go continue to target Ryan Williams for 18 times, dude. That screams hero ball. You're not going through progressions. There were so many open play schemes last week. So I'm not all over Nick Sheridan and Kalen DeBoer. Jalen Milroe just played really bad last week. Cannot have another performance like that, or you will lose to Missouri.
The thing that is really, I would say that kind of gave me a bit of hope for Alabama's play calling, they got the run game involved. And they only rushed for like 2.2 yards against a team like Tennessee, but they rushed it 34 times. You have two really good running backs in Jam Miller and Justice Haynes. And yes, Corey Batoon's defense has been playing out of its mind so far this year, especially for all the pieces that you lost the NFL and losing a guy like Blake Baker, bringing on in Batoon, who wasn't even the primary play caller at South Alabama because Kane Womack called the defense. To me, again, he's done his job. But again, also South Carolina's defensive front is completely different than Missouri's defensive front. And if you have two good running backs, ones that can truly set the tone, get to the second level of the field, force a Corey flag to bring you down and make it a 2nd and 1, make it a 3rd and short, give you a fresh set of downs, that benefits you. And you know what it also does, Dave? It allows a guy like Jalen Milroe to catch his moment to breathe. He does not have to play hero ball. He doesn't have to go ahead and utilize his legs and take those shots in the open field when he's trying to get out of bounds. He gets to now trust his ground game to pick up the pieces when they need him to pick up the pieces against Georgia, when they needed him to pick up the pieces against South Florida, when they needed him to step up for the first half against Wisconsin on the road. So that's really what you're looking at this point. I want to see them continue to punch it on the ground. I get it. You did have great success last week against Tennessee. Very few teams are going to have great success against that defensive front seven. Very few teams are going to be able to run the football with ease against what we've seen from Tim Banks' front seven this year. You can do that in this game. I agree with you, though. Ryan Williams cannot be your only target. He had 15 in the third Saturday in October. I think the next 18. I think the next closest receiver was 7, and that was Jeremy Bernard. You also can't afford to have dumb penalties. This is where it comes down to coaching, in my money. And even though I do believe Kalen DeBoer is the right guy, win or lose this season, he still is the right guy for the job. But look back at that one play. It's fourth down. It's 4th and 1. And Kendrick Law is getting in a shoving match with the defensive back, which I'm not sitting here and acting like the other guy didn't do anything, but you're the one that's down. You can't afford to shoot yourself in the foot with a careless, unsportsmanlike conduct penalty and put yourself back behind the sticks. You can't do that because this is not a game you can afford to lose. It is a resume killer if you're Alabama. It's also a season killer and a demoralizing loss because it still is Alabama. So can you avoid doing dumb mistakes? And if you are Missouri, can you maybe force this anger, this angst, this attitude that we've kind of seen on the sidelines in Bryant-Denny for the last few weeks? Can you kind of pull it out and maybe get a couple of players feel like they're the pressure? Because again, the one thing that we know about a guy such as Eli Drinkwitz is he's going to do everything possible to kind of urge up his players. Just ask what happened with Will Lee in Texas A&M.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm Alabama, you kind of go back and watch that A&M game against Missouri. And like you said, you probably go lean on the run game. Because I think, obviously, A&M has 2 good backs and Le'Veon Moss and Marnie Daniels. I think, like we mentioned, Justice Haynes, Jalen Milroe are certainly good enough. I could see Alabama going to lean on the run game early, and I don't think it's a bad decision there. I mean, if you're Corey Batoon in Missouri's defense, I think you got to just keep doing what everybody else has done. These really good defenses. Again, I don't think Missouri's a really good unit, but I think you got to continue to just bring the edge pressure, not just talking from an end, but like you're blitzing corners because Jalen Milroe can't see it right now. He's not seeing stuff in the flat, the little short yard plays. And as we all see, he drops vertically and runs 13 yards back. I feel like every game now he has some kind of intentional grounding, which is a horrific penalty because it's spotted the foul, loss of down. Those are drive killers. When it's 2nd and 6, 2nd and 5, you take something like that. I mean, now you're 3rd and 18. Those are just drive killers. If I'm Corey Batoon and them, you got to keep doing that. Maybe he does limit the turnovers this week. He hadn't done it the last 3, but maybe he does, but he's still likely to take negative plays and get them behind the chains. That's where I think against really good defenses, Jalen Milroe is always going to struggle because he's put enough game tape on to show that he cannot pick up and read blitzes off the edge and get the ball out quickly. 2 guys out in the flat. There's a play against Tennessee last week, 3rd and 2. Tennessee's cover 0, brings 6. 3rd and 2, Jalen Miller wide open out in the flats. He, of course, treats back vertically, gets to the edge, throws it to the side of the field. I think Ryan Williams coming back, but they didn't even run a route. Jalen Miller gets it. All he has to do is make a linebacker miss. He may go score. It's little stuff like that. It's like, man, you don't have to go make these superhuman plays or these hero plays. Just check it down right there, man. It's cover 0. It's 1-on-1. Go give it to your guy. For whatever reason, Jalen Milroe doesn't see that stuff. If I'm Corey Batoon, until he proves he can see the edge pressure that we're blitzing, I'm bringing it. And then on 2nd, 3rd down, I'm going to try to bring some blitz up the middle to try to get him to escape the pocket vertically, get a negative play. Till he can prove he can do that, I'm not going to do that. If I'm Alabama, though, I'm with you. I'm going to go try to see if I can run into that teeth of the defense, even with a loaded box at times, because that's what I think Missouri's going to do. Because if I'm Nick Sheridan, Kalen DeBoer, I'm big, well, A&M, pretty good offensive line. I think we got a pretty solid offensive line. Again, Jaden Roberts banged up a little bit, but I think we can establish the run. That's what I would do if I was Alabama, and that's what I would do, edge pressure, if I was Corey Batoon in Missouri.
When you and I do previews, we do 1 player to watch for, Alabama, Mizzou. I'll go first with Alabama. I'm going to cheat and say 2. It's Tyler Booker and it's Parker Brailsford. And it's the interior offensive line, and the reason why is because of Alabama needs to establish the run in this game. What you need to do is let Jalen Milroe stay healthy. You cannot afford to lose your quarterback, and more importantly, you cannot afford your quarterback to have to win through the air when you know right now he's a little bit banged up. Texas A&M averaged 6.6 yards per play against this Mizzou front seven. With Le'Veon Moss, with Amari Daniels, with a couple of big-time runs by Connor Wigman. E.J. Smith got involved, 6 carries for 26 yards. You need to do that, and the way to do that is by getting to that second level with your offensive line creating blocks. I got to see it from Parker Brailsford. I got to see it from Tyler Booker in this game. This is a moment where you feel like you get right. You don't get right against Mizzou. Let's not say that at all, because Mizzou can hold its own. They 100% can. But this is a moment where you get back to the basics of, this is why we came to Alabama. This is why we were highly touted. This is why people believe in us. This is why we are a program that can have that type of pedigree. And it starts with the ground game. The best way to open up the ground game is by having great blocking up front. It starts out with Tyler Booker, and it starts out with Parker Brailsford.
Yeah, I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit here for Alabama. It's Jalen Milroe to me. This team, the way they built this offense, it goes as Jalen Milroe does. He's not banged up. I think it's that front leg. If you go back and watch the games, he can't plant. His throws are selling. No one in the country, no player in the country needs a bye week more than Jalen Milroe. But that bye week doesn't come till next week, and Missouri's coming to town Saturday afternoon, ranked in the top 20, ready to continue their march towards the playoffs with only one loss right now. So I think he's going to have to play well. Again, you're right, Cole. I think the play calling's going to have to play well because he can play to his advantage, be complimentary with him. But Jalen Milroe can't make key mistakes, and that's not even just interceptions or fumbles. That's got to be, hey, you got to step up in the pocket and just, hey, maybe you fall forward for 2 or 3 yards. You can't be dropping 10 to 13 yards plays back or 13 yards back. Take these bad penalties. Jalen Milroe's the key because Alabama, Kalen DeBoer, Nick Sheridan have essentially said it in the way games are being called. We go as Jalen Milroe goes, and you saw that on Saturday with Alabama. He didn't play well. Offense couldn't muster up much. So it's Jalen Milroe again.
Defensively for Mizzou, there's so many ways I can go with this one. I guess I'll go with the low-hanging fruit and say Toriano Pride Jr. because if he's probably going to draw the most matchups against Ryan Williams in coverage, this is the veteran that comes on over from Clemson, had a couple big-time plays last week, get the fumble against Peyton Thorne. I mean, like, that's what you want to see from a dude that you expect to be your number one cornerback and be physical in the run game. But right now, it's very, very challenging for me to believe that Jalen Milroe is going to be able to target a Jeremy Bernard 15 times in a game or a CJ Dupree 12 times in a game. It feels like that they're going to get 8 or 9 targets and everything is going to go to Ryan Williams because Ryan Williams is a stud. And we all know how good Ryan Williams is. So if you're able to take out Ryan Williams and then you force the short to intermediate passes to a Kendrick Law, to a Kobe Prentice if he's healthy, to a CJ Dupree, to a Jeremy Bernard, at that point, it may end up benefiting you because if you're at least taking away the vertical element. So I'll go Toriano Pride Jr. I think that he's going to draw a couple matchups with Jeremy Bernard. I think for most of the afternoon, he is going to draw Ryan Williams. You take out number 2, you take out the number 1 threat.
I'm going to go Theo Weiss for Missouri. I'm going to go Theo Weiss there for Missouri. I just think there's going to be a ton of opportunities for them vertically with all the injury. I mean, King Mack's going to have to play. He's a limited athlete. Bray Hubbard in certain situations is a limited athlete. If he's not playing that Husky role, I think Kirby Moore, Eli Drink with them are smart enough to try to get those matchups with guys like Theo Weiss, Mookie Cooper. You can make a case for either one of those guys to me. Obviously, Luther Burden, but I think Kane Womack and them are smart enough to know, like, hey, we got to do something to take him away from the game. So, like, I'm going to go to another receiver. Give me Theo Weiss because if I'm Kane Womack, if I'm an Alabama fan, I'm terrified of what this wide receiver group could potentially do to an already very thin heading into the season secondary. I mean, you heard Nick Saban talk about it at SEC Media Days. That's why he didn't pick Alabama to win the SEC because he saw firsthand how thin that group could be, especially after he left with Caleb Downs, Trey Amos leaving, and now they're banged up. Again, you got to be salivating if you're Missouri. So it could be a big day for Theo Weiss.
Let's lock in some predictions. Kickoff scheduled for 2:30 Eastern 2:30 Central on ABC. 13.5 point spread in favor of the Crimson Tide. Over under set at 56.5. Dave, I'll let you take this one. Is Alabama season's over before we get to the month of November? Is Missouri still in the driver's seat to control their destiny to a college football playoff berth? Who you got and why?
We talked about it right off air. I don't know how Alabama's favored by 13.5. I still feel like people are just kind of living off the Alabama brand. They're seeing the crimson helmet, the white numerals. Well, me and you talked a little bit off air. I was watching Read and React yesterday. Somehow they were going through LSU's schedule, and LSU only has a 37% chance to beat Alabama at home in 2 weeks. I don't know who's making these calculations, these models people talk about all the time. If you go watch the film, Alabama is not a very good football team right now. That may be a little bit of an overreaction. They're an above-average football team. Hell, even Tyler Booker said they were just decent yesterday. I mean, an old player on their team just admitted they're decent. He's not wrong, but he admitted they're decent with a chance to be a really good team. And right now, they're decent. They need a bye week as bad as anyone. One person in the world that needs a bye week right now is Jalen Milroe. They have not played good football for the last 10 quarters. You got a Missouri team who still is in the hunt for the college football playoffs. Only one really bad game against Texas A&M. Does Missouri have their flaws? They absolutely do. They do. This isn't what South Carolina's defense is. Alabama should be able to establish a run game, put up some points, generate some explosive plays against this defense, as long as Jalen Milroe is not hindered. But I'll say this, if Jalen Milroe doesn't play good in the first half and you're down at half because of him, you may have to go make a move to Ty Simpson at some point. You may have to, because Jalen Milroe on Saturday against Tennessee, again, it's a team loss. You win as a team, you lose as a team. But Jalen Milroe was really bad that game and almost single-handedly lost in that game. Defensively, I think there's going to be shot plays there all day for Missouri. When you factor in Alabama's thin secondary, all the injuries, I think Missouri is going to have a chance to get theirs. I think this game is going to be really close goal. I really think it is. I think Alabama is going to be limping, crawling into the bye week, but it is at home. It's in the afternoon. I don't overly trust the Missouri defense. I think Alabama could have maybe their best day on the interior, on the ground they've had all season if they commit to it. I think Alabama somehow, some way pulls out another squeaker at home, hobbles into the bye week, and they have a chance to go save their season with a trip to Baton Rouge in 2 weeks. I think they get a 30-28 win. I think it's another nail biter. People are going to be on the edge of their seats because Missouri has something that Alabama has. Missouri has something that can go take advantage of a glaring hole that Alabama has on that back end right now. So give me Missouri. So give me Bama 30-28.
I don't want to make this pick because of either way, I feel like I'm hurting a fan base. I'm hurting Alabama because the reality is this is not a team that will win the national championship this year. This is a team that if you're very lucky and you play your cards right and you get healthy at the right time, you'll make the college football playoff and you'll be a road team in the college football playoff. You won't even get to host a game at Bryant-Denny Stadium. That's what you have to look forward to at this point. But at the same moment, I have been a bandwagon Mizzou fan. I call it like I see it. I have been on this team for a while, and I believe that the best still can be ahead of them. And if there was ever a blessing in disguise for a team like Missouri, number one, it's seeing your quarterback come out, deliver the performance of a lifetime on homecoming, and then number two, watching Eli Drinkowitz see the score come up and the stat line, and it says, 13.5-point underdog. All right, bet. Like, that's the best thing that can happen to Mizzou right now because they're feasting. They know that if they get this win, and they are 10-2, Dave, I don't really care if Alabama goes 7-5 the rest of the year. It's a top 15 win, and on top of that, it's at Bryant-Denny Stadium, and on top of that, it's Bama. The resume will speak volume because of it's Alabama at home. That will carry weight. So this is a guarantee for them to get to the college football playoff if they're 10-2. It is. If they're 10-2 with this win on the schedule, they will be in the dozen dance. But Alabama also is a team that I feel like has shown its true colors for this year. You know who hasn't? Kalen DeBoer. Kalen DeBoer is the right coach for this organization. I am tired of seeing people say, what's going to be the buyout? How much is it going to cost us to get rid of him? Who are we going to bring in? If you fire a coach that was a couple of plays away from winning a national championship and won a Pac-12 title, and on top of that, had back-to-back double-digit win seasons at a program that was coming off of its worst record in decades up in Seattle, you're basically telling everyone you're not Nick Saban, so don't even bother showing up. So he's the right guy for the job. He's shown you on the recruiting show that he can win. He's shown you what the up-tempo of this offense can look like at its peak. He's shown you what it means to be a leader and, more importantly, a guy that can get the job done at lesser-tier schools. And all he does is win. All he does. He has yet to show you why he belongs here and why he is the head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide. I think that's going to be the difference in this game. I'm going to agree with you. It's a close call. It's absolutely pathetic that we're seeing Mizzou be a 13-point underdog. So please go ahead and hammer that line if you want. In fact, I would do so right now before it even shrinks more, because if you're going to lose some money on this, I think this comes down to one final drive, one big-time play from Justice Haynes or Jam Miller. It sets up a Graham Nicholson game-winning field goal. 31-28, Alabama gets the win. They move into the bye week now, bowl eligible. And Missouri, they're not done. College football playoffs still can be promising, but now they're going to need a lot more help to be able to kind of get them over the ledge. But 31-28, final score for me, for Alabama.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Cole. It's going to be close. It also could be about what DC is going to be aggressive in this one because I think Alabama came out and said it. I mean, we know about Brady Cook. He went and got x-rays at the hospital. What DC is going to go be aggressive and try to go hit these two banged-up quarterbacks? Can they stay in the pocket, deliver, get them off their platforms? That'll be interesting as well.
So Dave has Alabama. I have Alabama. Mizzou, do you hate me at this point? I don't really know. Let us know in the comment section down below your score predictions, what you think of this game. Like, rate, review, subscribe. Follow us on the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at SEC Unfiltered. Follow Dave at Mock 10 Sports, me at Mr. Cole Thompson. Check out all of our great work found at secunfiltered.com. Who comes out on top in Titletown, USA? That's for them to decide on the football field. But for Dave Shumate, I'm Cole Thompson. Roll Tide, MIZ. Peace.